welcome everyone to another session. I was going to say episode again. Don't know why I always get stuck on this, but welcome to another session where today we're going to be focusing on the step-by-step guide to implementing contactless donations, plus what the onboarding process actually looks like. And I'm joined once again by Mr. Ben Black.
Hello, nice to see you again.
Good to see you again as well.
I thought I'd put a shirt on this time.
Do you know what? You do look dapper, and it seems like you're wearing trousers today and not shorts.
Yeah, well, you know, we're getting into the winter now.
Yeah,
really. We must be. Yeah,
and I'm still stuck here wearing shorts.
Yeah, well, you know, I'm taking these very seriously.
Yeah, no, it's good. So, are you saying that I'm not taking these seriously? All right. Without more being said. So in our last session, we focused primarily on all things transaction fees, and also cost-effective ways for fundraising. Would you like to just quickly give a recap on what we kind of touched on in that session for those that may have not tuned in?
So we talked about the complexities of transaction fees and what they consist of.
Yes.
So by all means, look back. It goes into a lot more detail about that. But we also touched on the importance of having a look at the market, comparing transaction fees in reality rather than just looking at the figures themselves, and then cost-effective fundraising, the range of options available at Payer with regards to rental terms and things like that, which brings us quite nicely onto this webinar.
Yeah, no, great. And if you haven't tuned into the second webinar, there will be some links to take you to watch those sessions. They are very, very valuable for you to kind of dive into. They're not boring, but they are very necessary to kind of plug yourself into. So do go ahead, tune in, and just take these all in. And this is an interactive webinar, so be sure to get your thoughts, your comments, your questions into the chat, and we will do our very best to get those answered for you. So let's move on to the questions. So the first question that I've got on today's topic, which is a step-by-step guide to implementing contactless donations, plus the onboarding process. Question one is, what are the initial steps for a charity looking to adopt contactless donation technology with Payer Charity?
Okay, so this is a mixed bag. Obviously, it does vary depending on the size of the charity, because different charities, different departments, different stakeholders. But ultimately, there are some key things that you need to look at before you go to Payer Charity and actually look at getting the units themselves. So review your activity. What are you doing? How are you generating that money? Is it predominantly collections? Is it events? Do you have assets, obviously, which is a really key one in terms of, do you actually have locations where people go to where you could put window units, for example, because they all have different functionalities, requirements and things like that. So the first thing, have a look at your activity. What are you doing? Where are you going to use these terminals? Then you can start to have a look at what terminals you would need.
Yes.
So we'll go on in a bit as to what the different terminals are and what they do and the functionalities of them, but they do all have different functionalities, from fixed amounts to Wi-Fi, battery life, PCI DSS compliance, in terms of having a unit that can be left unattended, really key. So just make sure you know what terminals you're looking at. Now, if that's the point where you could get in touch with Payer, though, you could say, these are my activities, what terminals would you suggest? And we can support you with that on what ones best suit your activities. Other things to look at is, what do you have current resources in place already? So, you know, the contactless world has probably really sort of sped up. Obviously, as you know, don't like to talk about COVID anymore, but we know that was a big impact. So you may already have resources you're using, but are they suitable for the activities you're doing? We do know that there's some terminals out there with other suppliers that are on 3G network, which we know is going. So it could be that you're looking at other options because that's not going to be available to you anymore. So have a look at what you're currently using. Use that data to fuel what you should then look to invest in. Have a look at how many internal stakeholders you need to have involved in your organisation. It's a bit easier if you're already using them, because most stakeholders will be aware of the terminals, what they're used for, processes. But the sorts of things you need to think about is the banking team, finance governance, legal, you've got procurement. So, and again, depending on the size of the organisations, these could be just one team or they could be multiple teams that would need to be involved. So just have a think about that and preempt those discussions.
Yeah.
Start having those discussions with those internal stakeholders, because down the line, they're going to be needed for some of the elements we're going to talk about. And then lastly, have a think about the users who are using these terminals.
Yeah.
Not so much needed right at this beginning point, but it's good to have in the back of your mind whether they are staff or volunteers, because you may need to factor in some training elements. And again, I'll come on to obviously how Payer can support with that, but there will be inevitably an element of a work that needs to be done within the charity as to targeting people on who need to be trained, or watch guides or videos.
Yeah. I guess this kind of leads me brilliantly onto my next question, which was, during the onboarding process, how long does that typically take?
So without going down too much of a rabbit hole, which is very easy to do when you're talking about this sort of thing, it all depends on what acquiring bank you go with.
Okay.
So if we're very fortunate at Payer, we have a very good, strong relationship with Just Giving. So we have them on board now as an acquirer. So most charities already have a Just Giving account. If you have, the process is incredibly quick. You could phone up, and in essence, what you're really doing with Payer is signing the equivalent of a mobile phone contract, because all you're doing is leasing a unit with a SIM card, and all the transactional data and processing goes through Just Giving, who you've already got an agreement with. So all the agreement stuff and paperwork with regards to the transactional process is all done.
Yeah.
So my advice would be that if you have that opportunity, then to go down that route. The reason why I would say it's good to start with Just Giving is because there is a lot of administration with regards to onboarding and acquiring bank. Now, Payer will take on a lot of that in terms of they're the liaison with the acquiring bank, but we still need all of the paperwork from the charity. So things like you've obviously got the contract that needs signing. You may need proof of ID of your trustees, which would be obviously potentially a passport and a utility bill. Depending on the size of your organisation, that could be 5, it could be 50. There are other ways around that, though. You can get power of authority, but again, you need 1 or 2 trustees or directors to sign that to give power of authority over. You need bank statements as well. Obviously, they can be redacted, but you still need that proof that you are a charity and you have an active bank account. So there's just a lot of paperwork involved. If you're an organisation that's going to be generating large amounts of money from these terminals in the long term, when you're talking £100,000, £250,000, getting towards £1 million mark and more, then obviously, yes, the acquiring bank of AIB, Elevon as an example, is a better route because you get the lower transaction fee. But if you're talking those lower amounts for one-off events or a couple of terminals throughout the year, and you have a Just Giving account, a lot simpler process.
If you don't have a Just Giving account, is that something that we as Payer Charity can assist a charity to do?
So we can give you, the information you need, the link to go to. It's relatively straightforward to open a Just Giving account. You may still need, again, it all comes down to the size of your organisation. You may still need to get obviously legal involved with that. But yeah, we can certainly help you with where to go, how to do it. And again, the process actually to open a Just Giving account is a lot quicker than bringing on board an acquiring bank like AIB and Elevon as an example. But yeah, so yes, we can.
Yeah.
Short answer.
Short answer. Trying to drop the wisdom.
Just yes.
The pearl. Yes, you can. Moving on to the next question. What resources does Payer Charity provide to charities during the implementation phase?
So we pride ourselves on having very strong relationships with the acquiring banks. I think I mentioned on the last webinar with regards to transaction fees, it's not just acquiring banks we have good relationships with, it's everyone involved in that process of taking a donation through a contactless terminal. So we will action a lot of these processes for you. So although we need the paperwork from you, we actually go ahead and process all of that, and we are the liaison with the acquiring bank to get all that actioned and processed. So, we offer that service, and we try and make it as simple and as pain-free as possible for you to get these terminals out there and raising money for your charity.
Yeah, and when it comes to like setting up, let's say, customization options available for contactless donation services, or devices, is that something that you can walk us through?
Yeah, so I'll show you some terminals in a second on how they look, but with regards to the actual setup, we set them up as part of the agreement, so that's all part and parcel of it. There's a setup fee included in there on the brochure, which you'll see, and that involves things like us putting the app on there, for example, which is personalised to the charity. You can dictate to us the amounts you want on there, so we can have it preset for you, ready to go. Same with the P66s. On the actual order form that we complete, we would put the amounts on there that you want on the terminal. So we try as best as possible to supply you the unit ready to go. Yeah. So you basically turn it on. Yeah. And then you're good to go. There's other elements we give you guidance on, which we'll come on to a bit later. But yeah, in terms of setup, we do all of that for you. Yeah. To go through how they're set up and how they look. So here we've got
He's starting the QVC stage early today.
So here we've got the P66 pay to terminal. Now, frustratingly, this isn't actually turned on, but I'll still just sort of talk you through it. So on the screen here, you'd have your donation amount. If you had it as a singular amount, it would just say tap to donate, and then you would just tap the card and the donation would be taken. If you had multiple amounts, there's a button down here with a triangle on it, and then you would just tap that and it would sequence through the amounts until they got to the amount they wanted, and then they'd tap to donate. Yeah. All of that can be pre-configured before it's sent to you. That's no problem at all. One thing to probably mention with these, if you're using the mobile SIM card, without I'm trying not to go into too much detail, but something that comes up a lot. These actually use multi-network SIM cards. So the idea is that they will pull on the strongest network. One thing to bear in mind with these, when you turn them on initially, it will always say, if it's using the mobile SIM, connection failed. The reason for that is it is connecting, but because it's constantly pulling on the strongest network, it won't commit to saying I'm connected when it displays when it first turns on. However, in the top left hand corner, you've got your signal bar, which will tell you whether you've got strong signal, and then there's a little eye in the top left hand corner. If the eye is there, that means that it's fully connected and the transactions are processing through to the portal and through to the acquiring bank. Now that's probably going into too much detail for this webinar, but it's just worth mentioning while we're going through them. But the device itself would be all set up to the amounts that you want on there. So in essence, you just turn it on and away you go. Moving on to the other terminals. So I'll show you this one, the handheld one. They both have exactly the same operating system in terms of the app that's installed on them. Again, so these predetermined amounts, you let us know what they are and we would put them on there.
I've got a question before you carry on. If I wanted to, let's say I have, I've used, this is the A50. I've used the A50 for a particular fundraising event, but the following month I have another event coming and I want to maybe change the amounts that are on there. How do I go about doing that?
So there's two ways you can do that. So we do have a support team who you can email and they can update the application.
Yes.
If they were to update the application, and then you'd quite simply tap on the menu option, hit Resync App, and then that automatically updates the app. So if we've done it here, you would do that and then the new figures would show. Yeah. However, the app has been designed so that you can do it if you want to yourself. So if you're, if it's a weekend, for example, or out of hours and you want to set it up for the next day, then what you can do is you can open up the options. And then if you go into settings and down here, you can amend your donation amounts. So you probably can't see that on the screen on the camera. But here, the settings are on there.
Yeah.
So you can do it all yourself, and then you just hit update at the bottom, and then it would update those amounts.
No, that's great.
But the point is, it's both options. We have a support team here to offer that service if required. The other benefit to obviously doing it using the support team as well, with regards to the whole app, is we could actually update every terminal simultaneously.
I like the beauty about the app functionality that we have. Can you kind of touch on about how our app functionality kind of separates us from maybe other providers in the space?
Yeah, I mean, personalization is really key.
Yes.
So you can put the logo on there, you can put an image behind there as well. Obviously, the amounts can be changed. That is very, very personal. It turns this into something that then becomes almost your product as a charity, because it's got your logo on there. It helps with that point of donation marketing as well, because it's all on the screen, it's all encompassed.
Yeah.
Other terminals that are out on the market don't have that option, so then you're having to invest on those point of donation marketing materials. You need the surrounds with your logo on and things like that. So this enables us to say, well, actually, here's a complete package, because it's got everything on there. It's got your logo, it's got an image, it's got the amounts. You're good to go.
Yeah.
Without all of that kind of point of donation elements required.
Yeah. No, that's something, because the difference between what we do and what other solutions may be out there in the market is, like you said, we've got it all in one package. Whereas you may buy the device elsewhere, but you're going to have to kind of go and get this bit and go and get that bit to kind of bring it all together. And by the time you've probably got something functioning, you've spent more than you probably wanted to have invested in the first place.
Exactly, and you've also got to think about that public perception as well. There are other terminals on the market, but a lot of other terminals are widely recognised, but they've got no branding on the terminal themselves. So you find yourself in a situation where you're putting a terminal down and there's nothing on that terminal that actually is convincing, if you like, that supporter that they're giving money to that need. We have had scenarios in the past on terminals that we've trialed and tested at the RNLI, and we've had some scenarios where we've had phone calls to our supporter care team where they think they've given to the RNLI on a terminal that we don't even use, because someone has obviously picked up a terminal, and because it's a contactless terminal, and they can go out there and pretend that they're obviously from a charity. Now, I'm pleased to say that is very, very minimal that I hear that happens, but it's very easy to do. Whereas this is very clear. It's got a logo on it, it's got an image, it's got the charity number on it, so it's very clear that terminal and the donations made is going to the charity. Yeah,
no, that's very great QVC session there from Ben. Moving on to the webinar, what training and support do we offer to charity staff and volunteers?
So there's guides available for every one of the terminals.
Yes.
So they're available online, they're PDFs, so they can be emailed out. But also on the A920 and the A50, you can actually access the guide on the terminal itself.
Yeah.
In addition to that, we are also working on video tutorials.
Yes.
So once they're all complete, they'll be available where we can give someone a hyperlink, or we could even provide QR codes. So in today's day and age on a mobile phone, you could effectively put the QR code to the guide on the box or on the back of the terminal, and then someone could scan it, and there's a video guide there of how to use the device.
They're going to be really very cool, trendy unboxing videos, but it's going to be extremely informative, showing you how to set up, showing you even some top tips and tricks on how to maximize those particular devices as well. So they're going to be really great once those are out. Yeah,
definitely. And I think what's really important as well, and what's great with the guides and working on the video tutorials as well, is there's loads that you can do with these terminals, but the guides is split up very well in terms of actually what does someone need to know. So it's always in categorization. So things as simple as how do you turn it on. So that's really important. It is important that people know how to turn it on.
It is, yeah.
But that's it. That's an important snippet of information. There's another element where on some terminals you can pull a full end of day transaction report. That's not necessarily important to everybody. They might just want to be able to see it on the screen. So there are different elements of the guide, but they're categorized in a very good way, where someone can actually think, right, actually, what do I need to know? Have a look at what they need to know and find the information from there. But in addition to that, what we also offer on top of the guides is we've got obviously our support team. And the support team are there and they can help with all sorts of things like report checks. So if a terminal's saying X amount of money, for example, and you've got a query about what's showing on your system, our support team are there to support with all those queries. They're there to do terminal checks as well. So if you're a community manager or a donation manager or contactless manager, you may have numerous devices that are out there all over the country. What our support team can do is they can support you in terms of giving you a report there to say which ones are dormant, which ones haven't been used, when were they last updated, when were they last turned on. And now all of that is available to you, which we'll come on to in a moment, but the support team are there to offer that support as well if needed. And the other thing we do is obviously push updates through to the devices. So that's all done automatically. So we do that because it's really important that things like the firmware is fully up to date, so they're functioning and working devices. You all know if you've got Apple iPhones, other mobiles are available, that you get updates through all the time. Works in exactly the same way. You need to do those things, but again, we try and take all of that away from you so that it just all happens and pushes through automatically.
No, that's very concise. How flexible are paid charity platforms in accommodating different charity needs and campaigns? Yes,
so we've actually got a new partner platform being developed at the moment. But even if you're using the old one, the whole point is we're just improving things as we go along. But there are various different reports available on there. So what Payer try to do is give everything that you could possibly need in a simple, easy access way, with a view that you can just take what you need. So we've tried to give you everything you'd want. And then, it's down to you is to take what you need. And touching again on things like device dormancy, you can have a look at when it was last turned on, when it was last updated, the last transaction. You can look at transaction summaries, average donation, number of transactions. All of this information is available, but it depends on what you actually want to use on that system.
So, what are the common challenges charities face during the onboarding process, and how do we as Paid Charity mitigate those?
The biggest challenge is if you're getting a new acquiring bank, getting all that paperwork that you need. So like I said, different charities have different trustees. Some are set up slightly differently as well, but getting an acquiring bank is literally like opening a bank account. And we all know when you open a bank account, you need your ID, proof of address. It's exactly the same scenario. And the difference with a charity generally is run by a board of trustees. So they're the ones that have to kind of give the authority over to say, yes, you can open an account in that name. So that is by far the biggest challenge in terms of gathering all that information together. Mainly because of the stakeholders that need to be involved. Legal, depending on the number of trustees and the size of the charity, you might need your company secretary on board. If they then relinquish the power of authority or complete a power of authority to give it over to our director or the chief executive, you've then still got to get the ID and the proof of address from the chief executive and the directors, which is probably easier, but you've got to get the power of authority first. So it's all of those things that come into that. Now, what Payer do is we kind of relieve the other headaches, which is once you've submitted all that information, the toing and froing of whether it's correct in the right format, the right detail, all of those sorts of things. We've got templates as well of like power of authority letters and things like that. So we take away all of that and make the process a lot easier once you've got that paperwork.
What feedback have we received from charities about their onboarding experience when it comes to working with us at Paid Charity?
Oh, I mean, we get some great feedback, especially when it comes to the Just Giving side of things. You know, it's so slick and smooth, and you know, we can literally give someone a terminal and have them set up incredibly quickly for them to go and fundraise. So for those kind of trials or last minute events, fantastic. But we also do get great feedback on the fact that we do take a lot of the stress away from charities, because, you know, I think I've said it before, we pride ourselves on offering a complete package.
Yes.
So wherever possible, we will try and minimise the impact on that charity to onboard a contactless device. There's some things we can't do, it's out of our control, but where we can, we try and obviously take that on board. And that's all part of that kind of setup and leasing fees. Yes. You know, that's why we do that. It all encompasses all of that. So we don't charge additional fees to take on all this additional work. It's all encompassed within that.
Yeah. I guess with your RNLI, I always struggle to say this. With your RNLI hat on, what has without being too biased, what has your experience been when it comes to your interactions with our services and also with some of the solutions that we have?
Yeah. So I'm in quite a unique position in as much as I can actually give experience across multiple different scenarios. Yes. So we've actually changed our acquiring, or we've had an additional acquiring bank. So we've had to gather all that information and data not only once but twice. We also changed our bank accounts because the account we're using in Ireland changed.
Yeah.
So again, we effectively had to open a whole new account. Even though it was with the same acquirer, we had to change the bank account the money was going into, which effectively caused us almost the same amount of paperwork. But what was great is actually having Payer there as that conduit between the acquiring bank and us, because Payer enabled us Payer sort of came with, you need X, Y, and Z. We were then able to go away and get X, Y, and Z, because Payer kind of translated the requirements from the acquiring bank into what we understood, rather than a lot of jargon and a lot of information that was unnecessary.
Yeah.
In terms of once we're onboarded, though, I mean, the service that the support team give is second to none. It's fantastic. You know, if you've got any concerns or queries, you know, I'm able to pick up the phone or email, and you know, the responses and the knowledge and expertise is there. It's not like I'm on the end of the phone, I'm getting someone saying, I don't know, I have to come back to you. You know, we have a very experienced and knowledgeable support team that are able to offer that support to our charities.
Yeah, no, I like the expertise aspect, the value aspect, the experience aspect, and also having the beauty about speaking to yourself is you have various perspectives about this, so you can speak from experience about the genuine impact that we can have in making the onboarding process, not just the onboarding process, but just any charity's journey with us, as smooth as possible. Yeah.
The other thing that's really beneficial is we talk about this onboarding, and we know Just Giving is obviously a simpler process, but once you are onboarded, the other upside is if you want additional terminals, that's a lot simpler.
Yes.
The actual ordering of additional terminals is really slick, really easy. That's just a case of literally popping an order in. Obviously, if you've got a procurement team, they obviously need to process that. But yeah, that's a really simple process. And that's where, again, simple information, how you want it set up, the term of the contract. But because everything's already onboarded and it's being part of an existing account, that's really, really smooth.
Yeah, no, that's really, really good to understand. Get your questions in the chat as well. We are monitoring these and we are answering these as well. So if you've got any questions, any comments, experiences that you want to share, get those in the chat and we'll do our best to get those answered as well. How does Payer Charity handle integration with existing fundraising systems or databases?
So I think I mentioned earlier, we're actually developing a new partner portal Now that's come off the back of feedback from certainly me with my RNLI hat on, but other charities that we work with as well, because as with anything, everything needs to evolve and improve as things improve around us.
Yeah.
In terms of integration, that is something we're definitely able to talk about. Different charities use different systems. We go into the realms of APIs, automations, and we are open to those discussions. Whether you're using the likes of D365, Charisma, Salesforce, all these different systems out there. It's certainly something that we're open to discussion to see whether we can work with you. We know how important it is to automate things. Everything, seems to be driving towards automation. In an ideal world, the system would push the information over overnight from that day, and it would upload into the system and automate it. But that is very much determined by what information your system needs, the format it needs it in, and also any not manipulation as such, but any reformatting you're already doing in-house. So, but the short answer is yes, we will work with you, and where possible, we will ease things from you by automating it if the option's there.
Yeah, and I guess the experience that we've had with some of these things in the past would help us in making that process as smooth, as efficient for everybody as possible as well.
And what Payer offer with their partner portal is if, for example, you have terminals that are going through different acquirers, for example, because you don't have to put all your eggs in one basket. You could have a selection of units that are through Just Giving and some that are through AIB, for example. If you're in that scenario, the other upside to the partner portal is it brings all of that together for you. So you're not having to pull reports from different places. You can just go onto the partner portal and all the information's there for your suite of terminals, irrelevant of what acquiring bank they're through.
Yeah, no, thank you for confirming that. On to our last question. What ongoing support does Payer Charity provide post-onboarding to ensure charities maximize their use of the technology?
So as I mentioned, we've got loads of sort of information there on the partner portal in terms of, making sure the devices are being used. When were they last turned on? Last transaction? That's really important because the amount of stories I've heard where charities have bought terminals for an event and then they've put them in the cupboard.
Yeah.
And they haven't bought them out again until the same event the following year. Whereas there needs to be that kind of realisation that if you put the terminals out on a counter, in a window, at any of your events, you'll see that income growth. So we certainly encourage charities to do that by providing that information about if terminals haven't been used, if they have lied dormant, if they haven't had a transaction in a while, or they're laying there and they haven't updated because they haven't been turned on. So all that information is there and we provide that. The other thing we do is app development. So we're continually developing what we have on our systems, our app development, so that we can add any additional functions that are identified in the market. One of the unique things about Payer that I've found, and I've worked with sort of 3 or 4 different big suppliers in the market, Payer are not shy about investing in development if the opportunity is there and they can see that it's going to be utilised and be beneficial for their customers. Whereas other suppliers where I've taken recommendations, suggestions, that development investment has had to come from the charity. Whereas I love Payer's outlook on this, that actually if it's good for one, it's probably going to be good for a number of charities, and it's in Payer's interests to invest in that so that more charities can come on board and benefit from the resources that we've got. So for me and my impression of Payer as an organisation, I'm proud of working with them on the fact that they're willing to take that on and invest in that development to better the growth of income for the charities in the sector. Yeah,
no, thank you for kind of breaking down what the processes are post onboarding as well. We hope that that's been quite an informative session for you. And if you do have any questions, continue to get them in. Even after these webinars and this session, we'll be able to get into the comments and answer those questions. We do have links for you to rewatch previous sessions as well, links to our website for you to kind of take a look at the suite of solutions and products that we do have. And also, if you do have any inquiries, feel free to get in touch to see how we can best help you with your fundraising endeavors. Before we close, do you have any final words, any final remarks at all?
So to summarize, because the focus of this webinar was that step-by-step guide.
Yes.
The first thing I would suggest is obviously having a look at your activity in the charity. Make sure you know what you're doing, how you're going to use the terminals, all that sort of thing. So you come best informed as to how you're going to use them. The next step is what terminals. So have a look at the brochure, have a look at the functionality, have a conversation with payer. We're here to have those conversations and help and support you on what we feel are the best terminals for what you're going to be doing. The next step is the acquiring bank. So all the money has to go through somewhere, and that's where you can have a look at whether Just Giving is the best option for you. We can work with you on that. Obviously that's beneficial again if you're doing a singular event or a trial and you have a Just Giving account, because it's a lot quicker process, although obviously the transaction fees are slightly higher. If time is on your side and you have stakeholders on side as well within the organisation, you can go down the routes of bringing on an acquiring bank, like, for example, AIB and Elevon. Once you've got an acquiring bank, we fill in the agreement, the contract, we set up the terminals for you, we send them out, you start fundraising. So although that webinar went into a bit more detail, we've got platforms, there's reports, there's data, there's a support team. Ultimately, know your activity, pick your terminal, acquiring bank, start fundraising.
It's as simple as that. As simple as that. And on that note, we will see you guys on the next webinar. Thank you so much for your time once again, Ben. And I will wear trousers.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
See you later.